I guess we'll do number two. Talking about manipulation media. You know, I've been looking a little bit about YouTube, and I'm discussing that. And look, and I do have credibility to speak on it because, like I said, they were somehow gave me one strike with the threat of you're going to be removed, and that's why I do the other video things. And so I have to debate, to just not do the YouTube and use some of the others. And those that study this stuff, one of my other video sites is Google Drive, which is owned now by Google, now owns YouTube. So, but my independent ones would be Vimeo, Facebook, independent of Google, and Twitter. And I noticed I read some articles where some in the media who are trying to ban Christian voices or voices who expose truth, they started criticizing Facebook and Twitter because they're not banning the same people that now YouTube has gone after. Now I want to give you a balanced view of what you see as media bias, and it's not just media bias, but it's media bias, and I'll give you a story that I spoke of this last year. The way the media, or the mainstream media, and even the Color Times, our local media, the way they cause tremendous damage is they feel, and they write, and they speak in a way that if a crime was committed, maybe a murder of a white person, and you try to expose any corruption in the murder of that white person, that some deem that as hate speech, okay? I'm not sure exactly. It's sad that YouTube is not going to be a trusted source anymore because they hired this past week, or recently, they hired those 10,000 people from the Southern Poverty Law Center. And those of you who watch my videos, look, I have spoken out openly against the shooting of Du Bois Lister, who I have right here, who was shot and killed by CCPD. And I advocated strongly. I'd take more risks than many of the Southern Poverty Law Center ever do, sitting behind their desks, never openly in the street advocating. But I have defended minorities, blacks who were, I felt, unjustly killed. But I also spoke about injustice against white people, as well as injustice against Hispanic people, Mexicans. But the Southern Poverty Law Center and some within that particular group, they believe that if you speak out against an injustice against a white person, some believe that's almost a hate crime to defend an injustice against a white person, which is sad, because you should advocate for everybody. Now, how does the Color Times fit into this? Look, I read news, I read politics, and what the media does is they mock any questions that are legitimate questions that have to do with particularly the liberal or democratic side. And I brought up last year about the murder of Seth Rich. Now, Seth Rich worked for Hillary Clinton in the DNC. And if you remember, we'll have to do a little bit here. But the questions then began to swirl against what's been very prominent in our media this last year about Russian hacking. How big of an effect did Russia have when they hacked into whether it was voting systems or the DNC? Now, the way we believe that Russia hacked into the DNC wasn't through our FBI investigating or Justice Department. There is an independent web protector, cybersecurity, that the Clintons and the DNC themselves hired, I think it's called CrowdStrike. And they made a determination that Russia hacked into the DNC. Now, of course, the FBI, Justice Department, you would get, quote, the servers. You would get all that in an investigation, primarily if you're investigating Russian hacking into the U.S. election. You would get that. The Mueller investigation, all this. The FBI and Justice Department have never personally obtained those computers from the DNC, which is unbelievable. And if you ask the FBI and the DOJ today, how have you, in this whole Russia investigation of hacking, how have you never personally, independently verified that Russia hacked those servers? Their answer would be, well, because the DNC will not hand them over to us. You subpoena those. You subpoena those. Until this day, they have not done that. Now, what about the conspiracy and the mockery that the media does? I mentioned last year, there was the person by the name of Seth Rich in 2016. He was murdered right there in Washington. And he was shot twice in the back. And he had a $2,000 gold watch on him. He had his phone, cash, wallet. He had, upwards of maybe $3,000 of stuff on him. Though he was shot twice in the back, there was not a single item missing from him. Not the $2,000 watch, not the wallet with credit cards and cash. Okay. Anybody would deem that somewhat questionable. Anybody who brought that up, the Caller Times ran opinion pieces that said it's a conspiracy nut if you question his death. Then after the election, Mrs. Donna Brazile, who's a Democrat, black and liberal, she wrote a book. And in the book, she said that her and others that were working for Hillary and the DNC, they believed that Seth Rich was murdered. Possibly by the Russians, she said, I believe, whoever she thought, she said they kept the blinds down on their offices right there at the DNC, working at the headquarters. Within their own circles, they believed he was murdered. Now, Julian Assange has hinted that this man by the name of Seth Rich was the one who actually gave the Hillary emails that were leaked, that this man, Seth Rich, gave them to Julian Assange. Meaning, if that's true, that this man, Seth Rich, was murdered, and it was a hit, because indeed, he was leaking some information to WikiLeaks. Now you say, but all of that could be a conspiracy. The parents of Seth Rich today will tell you that their son was indeed giving these emails from Hillary and all to Julian Assange. Now, most of you listening to me would think this is a total nut conspiracy. Read the article in the Washington Times by the former admiral who just documented all this. I think it came out Friday. And there's others, some guy, .com guy, there's others that would tell you that the odds that Seth Rich was murdered, killed, because he was leaking the DNC stuff to Assange, that's probably what happened. And when you have the parents of that dead white man testifying and stating that indeed their son was the one that gave those emails to WikiLeaks, then you would think, out of all these investigations, meaning we want to find out if Russia hacked, you would certainly think that the FBI and the Justice Department would have gotten those servers, those computers by now. And their official answer to us, to the citizens, is we asked the DNC and they didn't want to give them to us. So we simply relied on the analysis of a private web company called CrowdStrike. That's a joke. and there's probably more than enough evidence that that man, Seth Rich, was indeed murdered. Now, the Color Times and the media, when they spoke on this particular thing, Seth Rich, they mocked it. They said it's the biggest fairy tale in the world, it's the biggest conspiracy theory in the world, because it didn't fit with their agenda. Now, if you had a dead black man on that street, I would advocate just as strongly for that dead black man. But you have people right now working for YouTube that would actually say to me, we're thankful that you advocated for the minority. But when I brought up that one case of a white girl who brought her case to the Supreme Court, she was denied entry into a higher level university solely because she was white. And the media and others, when they saw that, not only did they not want to speak that that was an injustice, but if you spoke on it as an injustice, you'd be targeted. What a debacle. You know, at the fire department, I mentioned the other day, and I didn't tell the story. It happened yesterday, as a matter of fact. There's a black guy I've seen him a few times. I don't interact with him. No problems or anything. But there was some problems that happened a few weeks back, and then he was out. And he's maybe about my age. And maybe, like fairly big or whatever. And so then he's had some problems with some of my homeless friends who are white. But that was the guy yesterday where we were sitting somewhere where I hang out with the guys. And there was two people in the alley there. We called it the breezeway. The cops might want to know about this particular thing. Because what happened was, that black guy in the alley, you could hear him, he was yelling. And so my friend George got up, because George, that's where he sleeps, he's homeless. And that's called the breezeway. And they don't like it if there's a lot. So he probably should have stayed out of it, because we were all sitting on, they call it the sled. But then he went over by the fence, and he yelled like, hey, And then you heard the black guy, and I could only see George, and the black guy was still in the alley. I didn't know he was the black guy at this point. And you heard him telling George, step in here, and I'll do this and this and this. But he wanted to do it in the alley. Then I saw George flinched. The guy was going to throw a punch. I still didn't see the guy. But then he came out, and he's with the girl that he says is his wife, because he got into it with somebody else one day, and maybe she has a drug problem. Well, either way, that's where they were going to start getting into it. And at one point, sadly, the term nigger came up. Now, I use that knowing that people don't like that. But look, I have tried, and when I have used it in the past on video, it wasn't intended, nor is it now intended to be offensive to anybody that's black. As a matter of fact, I'm looking at one of the first homeless guys in New York. His name was Alani. I just met him that day. That was in New York City at the Port Authority. I have another black friend I met on the New York trips. His name was Jehovah, believe it or not. He wasn't lying. I think his family might have been Jehovah's Witnesses. And I met those guys hanging on the streets of New York. So they were getting into it. And then the black guy was telling, you're just a bunch of poor white trash. That was the racial aspect of it. But when you, maybe a Seth Rich, who, I'll have to post that article, share it, Washington Times, by a former admiral, a man that is a quality man, that said the same things that I said last year about this murder of Mr. Rich. And that why would that be covered up? And why would the media ever say that's a conspiracy? And if I advocated for that girl who was denied entry into a high-level university because of what was referred to in our country is its quotas, basically. They try to get so many, and I want minorities and everybody to have a fair shot, and I want us to. But when you have people that are discriminated against solely because of race, that's the definition of it, racism. And so maybe the kids, it's unbelievable that YouTube actually had people come in with agendas. I'm a little upset to this degree that I've had my wars with my own websites. And I'll credit LinkedIn because I think when I had the little war with LinkedIn, they deleted all my stuff. But that's because they legitimately, LinkedIn and Twitter and some, they think I'm a bot because of all the tweets and and I know that they think that until I actually say, no, I'm doing these links myself, which I am. But I credit LinkedIn because I have some harsh posts. As far as I know, they're still on LinkedIn, and I still am posting my normal ones. But what makes me like I don't, if I'm doing business with any website, any organization, if I feel that now you got a bunch of kids in there making decisions based on some of the stuff I'm talking about. Maybe they saw, oh, this guy spoke up in defense of an injustice against a white girl, and some in the Southern Poverty Law Center believe it's wrong. Some believe that even if there was a white or a black on white crime, meaning if a black person possibly even tragically killed a white person, and he said, I did it because they were white, that would be wrong, just as wrong as the other. But some think if you speak on that you are involved in hate speech. Meaning if you revealed that there was a racial animosity and it was the other way around, that you should not even speak on it. That's why when I see these media people, when I spoke on the Seth Rich case, there are legitimate real questions. And how did this media here, who pollutes our city with their newspapers all over the place, they had opinion pieces that said it is a conspiracy, and they mocked it, made fun of it. Now let me ask you, if that was a black man by the name of Seth Rich, and that black man's black parents said, we want the murder of our son resolved, and their son was murdered and shot twice in the back, and not robbed, and he had expensive stuff on him, and their son also was connected to some of the things that were going on. He was trying to expose corruption maybe, and releasing emails to an organization to expose what he deemed as corruption. You would cover that up. That shows you. And so the one thing about the YouTube, I'm not going to delete the ones I have on there, but then now you got to change your system of, utilizing the other ones. And you want to deal with reputable people. You don't want to deal with a media that makes fun and mocks, yet the parents of that dead man will vouch that their son was indeed the person that was leaking these Hillary stuff to WikiLeaks. And it was kind of known. And the way, if I'll post that article, and if you simply read it from the Washington Times, why would Mr. Mueller not have subpoenaed those servers to find out? They covered that up. Okay, I did this as the update because this has to do with what's going on right now. In the whole YouTube purge, trying to purge people that, so now the people are not going to want to upload there anymore. Sad. And then the Google has like a monopoly. Because, but look, I'm on Google Drive. Sad. It's very sad. You want freedom of expression. You want advocacy for every injustice, regardless of race. You don't mock the death of a white man, young kid, because his parents and others had legitimate questions about his murder, and that this local media mocked it. Like you have got to be a conspiracy theorist to believe. No, read it. They're so uneducated. The media is so uneducated. So this will be number 2. I'm not sure what we'll title it.